A billionaire handed his unlimited black card to a homeless woman and told her to spend whatever she wanted for 24 hours. 47 minutes later, his phone buzzed with a transaction alert. It wasn't groceries, it wasn't clothes, it wasn't even a hotel room. It was something that made his blood run cold. A purchase for $156,000 at a hospital he'd spent 5 years trying to forget. In that moment, she made a choice that would expose a secret he'd buried beneath millions of dollars and endless guilt. A truth that would shatter everything he thought he knew about trust, about humanity, and about the daughter he'd lost. And when he discovered what she knew, both their lives would change forever. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. 42-year-old Michael Harrison hadn't believed in human decency since the day his daughter died. As the chief executive of Harrison Pharmaceuticals, a company worth $9.8 billion, he'd watched humanity at its absolute worst. People who would lie, cheat, and destroy for money they didn't even need. His penthouse in downtown Chicago had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, art worth millions hanging on walls that echoed with nothing but silence. He owned properties in 7 different states. His watch cost more than most people earned in 2 years, but every single morning he woke up suffocating under the weight of a loss that no amount of money could reverse. Because 5 years ago, his 8-year-old daughter Emma had died waiting for a medication his own company manufactured. The insurance paperwork took too long. The approval process got delayed by bureaucrats who never met her, never saw her smile, never heard her laugh. By the time the red tape finally cleared, she was gone. His wife blamed him, divorced him within a year, took their son to California and changed their last name, erasing him from their lives as if he'd never existed. Michael's father, the company founder, had drilled one lesson into him since childhood. The poor will bleed you dry, son. Help nobody. Trust nobody. Sentiment is a luxury successful men cannot afford. For 42 years, Michael had followed that teaching like scripture, never questioning it, never challenging it, never wondering if maybe his father had been wrong about everything that mattered. Until one February morning, when something inside him finally broke open like ice cracking on a frozen lake. He was late for a critical investor meeting, rushing through Union Station with his assistant practically jogging to keep up. His wool coat cost $7,500. His briefcase held contracts worth $68 million. His mind raced with projections, percentages, profit margins, all the numbers that defined his existence. Then he saw her. Huddled against the cold tile wall near the Red Line entrance sat a woman, maybe 32 or 33 years old, with exhaustion carved into every line of her face. A little girl, no older than 7, slept curled in her lap, wrapped in a donated coat 3 sizes too large. The woman's arms were locked around the child, like she was the only thing keeping her daughter tethered to the world, the only barrier between her and the cruelty of winter. A piece of cardboard rested beside them. Black marker, shaky letters, single mother, medical bills destroyed us. Anything helps. God bless. Michael stopped walking. His assistant nearly crashed into him, her heels clicking on the tile as she caught herself. Mr. Harrison, we have exactly 8 minutes to make this meeting. The investors are already in the conference room. Wait here, Michael said, his voice distant, disconnected from the urgency swirling around him. He approached slowly, unsure why his legs were moving, when every logical part of his brain screamed to keep walking, to ignore this, to stick to the schedule that ran his life with military precision. When the woman looked up, there was no performance in her eyes, no rehearsed desperation, no theatrical plea designed to manipulate sympathy, just bone-deep exhaustion, the kind that settles into your marrow after carrying weight no human should bear alone. Her lips were cracked from winter wind. Her fingernails were clean but ragged, evidence of someone who'd given up on vanity but not on dignity. And the little girl sleeping in her arms looked exactly like Emma had at that age, the same small nose, the same way her mouth fell open slightly when she slept. Michael's chest tightened like someone had wrapped steel bands around his ribs. "I'm sorry," the woman said immediately, her voice rough from cold and disuse. "We're not bothering anyone. We can move if we're in the way." "What's your name?" Michael asked. kneeling down despite the protest of his expensive suit pants touching the filthy subway tile. The woman blinked, surprised that someone in a suit that expensive would even acknowledge her existence. Sarah Matthews. And your daughter? Sarah's arms tightened protectively around the sleeping child, an instinctive response that mothers develop when the world has proven itself dangerous. Her name is Lily. She just turned 7 last month. Michael studied Sarah's face more carefully now. Intelligence lived behind that exhaustion. Education in the careful way she spoke, in the grammar that hadn't been erased by months of survival mode. This wasn't someone born into poverty. This was someone who'd fallen from somewhere higher and couldn't find footing on the way down, couldn't catch a break, couldn't climb back up, no matter how hard she tried. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. Shame flickered across Sarah's features like a match struck in darkness. 4 months. We were staying with my sister until October, but she lost her apartment too. The landlord raised the rent and she couldn't afford it anymore. So we've been rotating between here and the shelter on North Avenue when they have space available. 4 months. A 7-year-old child sleeping on subway floors for 4 months, while thousands of people walked past every single day. His assistant cleared her throat impatiently behind him, the sound sharp with frustration. "Mr. Harrison, the board members are waiting." Michael raised one hand without looking back, silencing her with a gesture he'd perfected in boardrooms. His father's voice echoed in his skull, that familiar refrain he'd heard since childhood. The desperate will bleed you dry and smile while doing it. They'll take everything and demand more. Maybe it was time to test that theory himself, to prove once and for all whether his father had been right, or whether Michael had spent 42 years believing a lie that protected his wealth but poisoned his soul. Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, the leather soft and expensive against his fingers. Sarah's eyes widened slightly, probably expecting a few bills. $20 if she was lucky. Maybe 50 if the universe decided to be generous for once in her miserable 4 months. Instead, Michael pulled out a sleek black credit card with platinum edges and raised numbers. No spending limit, no restrictions, no oversight. Pure, unrestricted access to wealth most people couldn't imagine in their wildest dreams. Sarah stared at it like he'd pulled out a weapon, something dangerous and incomprehensible. "Take it," Michael said, holding the card between them like a bridge spanning 2 completely different worlds. "I don't understand," Sarah stammered, pulling Lily closer as if the card itself might harm them somehow. "It's yours for 24 hours, Michael explained, his voice steady despite the chaos of doubt screaming inside his head. "Buy whatever you want, no limits, no questions, no conditions attached." Sarah's hands began to tremble. "Sir, this has to be some kind of trick. People don't just hand out credit cards to strangers, especially not to people like me." "I want to test something," Michael interrupted, surprising himself with the honesty in his voice. "Something my father taught me about human nature, about what people do when they're desperate, prove him right or prove him wrong. Either way, I'll finally know the truth." He pressed the card into her palm. Her fingers were ice cold, rough from exposure to Chicago winter, shaking like leaves in a storm. "Why me?" Sarah whispered, tears pooling in eyes that looked like they'd cried themselves empty months ago. Michael looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully despite the cold, despite the noise of commuters rushing past, despite the absolute instability of her entire world. He thought about Emma, how she'd looked sleeping in that hospital bed during those final weeks, how her hand had felt in his during those final hours, so small and fragile. "Because I need to know if there's still something good left in people who've lost everything," Michael said quietly. "Because I need to believe that desperation doesn't automatically turn people into the monsters my father warned me about. Prove him right or prove him wrong. Just be honest." Sarah closed her fingers around the card slowly, like someone touching fire for the first time and expecting to be burned. 24 hours, Michael repeated, standing up. His knees ached from kneeling on the frozen tile. "Spend whatever you want. There's no personal identification number to memorize. Just sign your name. I'll find you here tomorrow morning. Same time, same place. We'll settle everything then." His assistant looked physically ill, her face pale with professional horror. "Mr. Harrison, this is highly irregular. We should at least establish some legal parameters, some kind of protection." "No parameters," Michael said firmly. His eyes still locked on Sarah. No protection, no contracts, just trust. The word felt foreign in his mouth, a language he'd forgotten how to speak years ago. Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but no sound came out. She just clutched the card like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning in deep water. As Michael walked away, his father's voice whispered warnings in his head like a ghost haunting him. "She'll drain your account. She'll disappear into the night. You're a fool, Michael. A sentimental, naive fool who never learned the most important lesson I tried to teach you." But another voice, quieter and more fragile, whispered something different, something hopeful. What if she doesn't? What if he's wrong? Michael didn't sleep that night. His penthouse felt enormous and cold, despite the heating system that cost more than most cars. He stood at the window for hours, staring at Chicago's glittering skyline, wondering if somewhere down there in those thousands of lights, Sarah and Lily were finally warm for the first time in months. He pulled out his phone around midnight, opened his banking application with trembling fingers. The credit card was linked to his personal account, not the business accounts with their layers of oversight and approval processes. He could track every transaction in real time, every purchase, every decision she made. For hours, nothing appeared on the screen. Midnight came and went. 1 in the morning, 2, 3. Still nothing. No charges, no activity. Just the card number sitting there unused. Why wasn't she spending? Was she afraid to use it? Did she think it was some kind of elaborate trap? Or worse, was she planning something massive, waiting for stores to open, preparing to maximize every possible dollar? At 6:47 in the morning, his phone finally buzzed with a notification. Transaction approved, $43.67. Location, 24-hour Walgreens, downtown Chicago. Michael's pulse spiked. He clicked for more details, but the application only showed the amount and location, not what items were actually purchased. Then another notification appeared 30 minutes later. Transaction approved, $387.92. Location, Target, State Street. His eyebrows rose. $387, that was more substantial. Still modest compared to what she could spend. But maybe she was warming up to the idea. Maybe she was testing the waters before diving into bigger purchases. Then another notification arrived at 7:23. Transaction approved, $2,847. Location, Northwestern Medical Center. Michael sat up straight in his leather chair, his heart suddenly pounding. A hospital? At 7 in the morning? Why would she go to a hospital? Had something happened to Lily during the night? Was she sick? Injured? Had some medical emergency struck? He grabbed his phone, almost called the hospital directly, then stopped himself. 24 hours. No questions, no interference. You promised her freedom to make her own choices. But his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Then, at 8:15 in the morning, another notification lit up his screen. Transaction approved, $156,000. Location, Northwestern Medical Center. Michael's blood turned to ice. $156,000 in a single transaction at a hospital. His mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Had Sarah discovered she was dying? Terminal cancer? Some disease she'd been ignoring because she couldn't afford to get checked? Had Lily been hiding symptoms of something catastrophic? Or was this exactly what his father had warned him about? Some elaborate medical billing fraud scheme? Some way to drain his account using fake procedures or forged documents? Michael's hands trembled as he grabbed his phone and dialed his driver. "I need you at my building now. 5 minutes, no later. Mr. Harrison, it's 8 in the morning on a Saturday. I need to get my daughter to her soccer game. I don't care. Now." He dressed in record time, his mind creating scenarios faster than he could process them. $156,000 at a hospital. What could possibly cost that much in a single transaction? Emergency surgery? Experimental treatment? Some kind of advanced procedure? Or was his father's cynicism finally proven correct? 20 minutes later, Michael burst through the doors of Union Station, his heart hammering against his ribs so hard he thought it might crack through. He rounded the corner toward the Red Line entrance, preparing himself for the worst, expecting to find the spot empty, Sarah and Lily long gone with his money. But he stopped dead. Sarah was there, right where he'd left her. And Lily was there too, awake now, smiling, wearing a brand new purple winter coat with a fur-lined hood that looked warm and expensive. Her hair had been brushed and pulled back with a small butterfly clip. She clutched a new stuffed bunny while coloring in a fresh coloring book with crayons that still smelled like they'd just come out of the package. Sarah saw Michael approaching and immediately stood up, the black credit card already trembling in her hand. "I was going to return it," she said quickly, panic edging into her voice. "I promise I was going to bring it back. I just needed to do something first, something important." "Keep it," Michael interrupted, his voice strained and tight. "You still have hours left. The 24 hours aren't up yet." "I know, but I needed to explain. I needed you to understand why I made the choices I did." "Sarah," Michael's voice came out harsher than he intended, sharp with fear and confusion. "What did you spend $156,000 on at Northwestern Medical?" The color drained completely from Sarah's face, leaving her looking almost ghostly pale. "You can see the transactions?" "Every single one," Michael said, his chest tight with emotions he couldn't name. "Every purchase, every location, every dollar spent. So I need you to tell me right now, what the hell did you buy at that hospital that cost $156,000? Sarah's eyes filled with tears that spilled over almost immediately. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice fracturing around the edges. "I should have asked permission first. I should have explained before I did it. But there wasn't time to find you, and I thought maybe if I could just help, if I could do something good with money I'd never have access to again, then maybe it would be worth the risk of you being angry." "Sarah," Michael's voice cracked now, desperation bleeding through. "Please, just tell me what you did." Sarah took a shaky breath, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "There's a little boy in the pediatric oncology ward at Northwestern. His name is Daniel. He's 6 years old. He has acute lymphoblastic leukemia." Michael's heart stopped. His entire world seemed to tilt sideways. "His parents are migrants from Guatemala," Sarah continued, her words tumbling out faster now. "They have no insurance, no savings. They've been living in a shelter while their son gets treated. The hospital has been providing care, but they can't continue the treatment protocol without payment. Daniel needed a specific medication, a new immunotherapy drug that's not covered by any assistance programs. Without it, the doctor said he had maybe 3 months left, maybe less." She trailed off, but she didn't need to finish the sentence. Michael knew exactly what happened to children who didn't get the medication they needed. He'd held one while she died. He'd buried one. "How did you know about him?" Michael asked, his voice barely above a whisper now. "Last week, Lily and I were sleeping in the hospital waiting room because it was warmer than the subway station," Sarah said softly. "The security guard usually chases us out after a few hours, but that night he let us stay because the temperature had dropped below 0. I met Daniel's mother around 3 in the morning. Her name is Maria. She was crying in the hallway outside her son's room. She told me the doctors had just informed her they couldn't continue treatment without payment, that they'd done everything they could for free. But the new medication protocol required upfront payment because it's so expensive." Sarah wiped her eyes again, tears flowing freely now. "Maria showed me a picture of Daniel. He's this tiny little boy with the biggest brown eyes I've ever seen. He loves dinosaurs. He wants to be a paleontologist when he grows up." She paused, her voice breaking completely. "If he grows up." "When you gave me that card," Sarah continued, "the first thing I thought about was Lily. Getting her warm clothes, getting her fed properly, getting her somewhere safe where she wouldn't have to sleep on cold tile anymore. But then I kept thinking about Daniel, about his mother crying in that hallway, about a 6-year-old boy dying because of numbers in a computer system. Numbers that meant nothing to people like you, but everything to people like Maria." She looked up at Michael, her eyes red and swollen. "I know I had no right to spend your money on someone else's child. I know you gave that card to me for Lily and me, for our survival. But I couldn't stop thinking, what if someone had helped my daughter when she needed it? What if someone had seen us struggling and actually done something real instead of just walking past like we were invisible? And I knew, deep in my soul, that if I walked away without helping Daniel, I'd be exactly like all those people who walked past us every single day. I'd be just as guilty of looking away when someone was suffering right in front of me. She held out the credit card with both hands, shaking so hard the plastic rattled. "I'm so sorry. You can take it back. You can call the police if you want. You can press charges. But I couldn't let that little boy die when I had the power to save him. I just couldn't." Michael turned away from her, his shoulders shaking. Sarah thought she'd made a terrible mistake, that she'd violated his trust in the worst possible way, that she'd proven his father right after all, but she was wrong. She'd proven something else entirely, something that shattered every cynical belief he'd built up over 5 years of grief. Michael pulled out his phone with trembling hands and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. It rang twice before someone answered. Northwestern Medical Center, Patient Services. "How can I help you?" "This is Michael Harrison," he said, his voice thick with emotion he couldn't control. "I'm the chief executive of Harrison Pharmaceuticals. I need to speak to someone in the billing department immediately." "It's about a patient named Daniel, 6 years old, oncology ward." "Yes, sir. One moment, please. Hold the line." Michael turned back to Sarah, who was watching him with wide, confused eyes, clearly not understanding what was happening. A new voice came on the line, professional and efficient. "Mr. Harrison, this is Amanda Chen, head of billing. How can I assist you today?" "There was a payment made early this morning for a patient named Daniel," Michael said, his words coming faster now. $156,000. I need you to refund that charge to the card immediately." Sarah's face went completely white. "Sir, I'll need to verify the transaction details. But may I ask why you want to refund a completed payment?" "Because I'm going to pay for his treatment myself," Michael said, tears now streaming freely down his face. "Refund the card. Send me Daniel's complete medical file and treatment plan within the hour. Every medication he needs, every therapy session, every appointment, every single thing required to save his life. I want it all documented and sent to my personal email." There was a long pause on the other end. "Sir, that would be quite extensive. The full course of treatment could run well over $500,000 when you factor in the immunotherapy protocol and ongoing care." "I don't care what it costs," Michael said, his voice breaking completely now. "Make it happen. And while you're at it, I want to establish a fund at Northwestern for the pediatric oncology department. Enough money to ensure no other child is ever denied treatment because their parents can't pay. Can you handle that, or do I need to speak to someone else?" "No, sir. I can absolutely facilitate that. This is extraordinarily generous. How much would you like to allocate to the fund?" "Start with $5 million, Michael said. "We'll add more if needed. I'll have my attorneys contact you on Monday to formalize everything. But Daniel's treatment starts immediately, today. No delays, no waiting for paperwork." "Yes, sir. Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. This will save lives." He hung up. Sarah was staring at him, her mouth open, tears pouring down her face like a dam had finally broken. "You didn't have to spend your money saving Daniel," Michael said softly, walking toward her slowly. "Because I'm going to spend mine. You gave me something far more valuable than $156,000. "What?" Sarah whispered, barely able to speak. "You reminded me why my daughter died," Michael said, his voice breaking completely now, all professional composure gone. 5 years ago, my 8-year-old daughter Emma died of leukemia, not because the medication didn't exist. My own company manufactured the exact drug that could have saved her life. She died because of insurance delays, because of bureaucracy, because of authorization requirements and approval processes and all the bullshit red tape that prioritizes paperwork over human lives." Sarah's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes going even wider. "I've spent 5 years blaming everyone else," Michael continued, his words tumbling out now in a rush of confession he'd never spoken aloud before. "Blaming insurance companies, blaming hospital administrators, blaming the healthcare system, blaming everyone except the one person who actually had the power to change things from the inside." He looked down at Lily, who was watching the adults with wide, uncertain eyes, not fully understanding, but sensing the emotional weight of the moment. "Myself," Michael whispered. "I blamed everyone except myself. I watched my daughter die because of money, and instead of fixing the system that killed her, I just closed off, built walls, convinced myself that helping people was pointless because you can't save everyone. So, why bother trying to save anyone?" He looked back at Sarah, really seeing her now. "You showed me something different, something I'd forgotten or maybe never really understood. You had every reason to be selfish, to think only of yourself and Lily. You're homeless, you're desperate. You've been failed by everyone who was supposed to help you. But when you had the chance to take everything for yourself, you still saw someone else's pain and chose to help. That's not just kindness. That's not just generosity. That's extraordinary humanity that most people with everything don't possess. Michael's voice dropped to almost a whisper. You're a better person than I've been in 5 years. Maybe better than I've ever been in my entire life. Sarah was fully crying now, her shoulders shaking with sobs she'd probably been holding back for months. Your daughter didn't die because you failed her, she said through tears, her voice fierce despite the crying. She died because the system is broken, because we live in a country where children die over money, while billionaires buy third vacation homes they'll never visit. She stepped closer to him, her voice strengthening. But you can change that now. You have the power to make sure Emma's death meant something. You can save the children who come after her. You can break the system that killed her. Michael looked at this homeless woman, this person his father would have dismissed as worthless and dangerous and desperate, and he realized she was the strongest, most compassionate person he'd met in years, possibly ever. Come with me, he said suddenly, the words surprising even himself. What? Both of you? Please, come with me right now. Fear flickered across Sarah's features. Where? Somewhere you can finally stop running, Michael said. Somewhere warm, somewhere safe, somewhere you can breathe without constantly looking over your shoulder. Michael took them to his penthouse, not a hotel where they'd be temporary guests, his actual home, the place that had felt like a tomb for 5 years. When they stepped inside, Sarah froze in the doorway, unable to cross the threshold. I can't, she whispered, her voice tight with something between fear and disbelief. This is too much. We're nobody. We're just 2 people who got unlucky and fell through every crack in the system. You're the person who reminded me what being human actually means, Michael interrupted gently. You're the person who saw my daughter in a stranger's child and chose love over survival. You're not nobody, Sarah. You're extraordinary in ways most wealthy people will never understand. Lily, unburdened by adult disbelief and social conditioning, walked inside immediately and gasped at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, stretching out like an ocean. Mama, look, she called out, her voice filled with wonder. It's like we're flying, like we're birds. Sarah finally stepped inside, moving like someone walking through a dream that might shatter at any moment. She set down the plastic bag that held literally everything she owned in the world, and her hands were shaking. This is temporary, Michael said quickly, wanting to reassure her. Until we find you a real apartment, something permanent, something stable where you can build an actual life. Michael, I can't accept all this, Sarah said, her voice breaking. This is too much. I don't deserve this level of help. Yes, you can accept it, Michael said firmly. Because I need you to. Sarah turned to face him, confusion clear on her face. I'm restructuring my company's patient assistance program, Michael explained, the plan forming even as he spoke. Making our medications available at cost or completely free to families who can't afford them. No more deaths like Emma's, no more children like Daniel dying because of paperwork and bureaucracy and profits over people. His voice grew stronger, more certain. But I need someone who understands what it's like on the other side of the system. Someone who's lived through the system failing them at every level. Someone who won't let me lose sight of what actually matters when the board members start talking about profit margins and shareholder value. He looked directly at Sarah, holding her gaze. I need you to help me run it. Help me make sure we never forget who we're actually serving. Me? Sarah's eyes went wide with disbelief. Michael, I'm homeless. I don't have a college degree. I don't have experience in pharmaceuticals or healthcare or corporate anything. You have the only experience that matters, Michael interrupted. You know what it's like to watch your child suffer and feel completely powerless. You know what the healthcare system looks like from the bottom, from the perspective of people it's supposed to serve, but usually just crushes. And you just proved you have more compassion in your little finger than my entire executive board combined. He smiled softly for the first time in what felt like years. You don't need a degree to understand suffering. You need a heart, and yours is the biggest I've seen in years. Sarah sank onto the leather couch, her body folding like someone who'd been holding up the sky and could finally let someone else carry the weight. Why are you doing all this? She whispered, looking up at him with tears still streaming down her face. "Because you gave me my daughter back," Michael said simply, his voice thick, not literally. "Not in any way that reverses what happened, but you reminded me who she was, what she believed in, what she stood for. Emma used to make me donate to children's hospitals every month. She'd use her entire allowance to buy food for homeless people we passed on the street. She saw suffering and immediately wanted to help, never walking past it, never pretending not to see it." He sat down beside Sarah, suddenly exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. "I forgot all that after she died. I forgot everything except the pain and the anger and the guilt. But you reminded me. When you spent $156,000 on a child you'd barely met, you showed me exactly what Emma would have done if she'd survived and grown up. You showed me what love looks like when it has resources behind it." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "You showed me what my daughter wanted me to become." 3 days later, Michael stood at a podium in front of hundreds of journalists, investors, and pharmaceutical executives. Camera flashes went off like lightning. Microphones crowded the podium. The room buzzed with anticipation because Michael Harrison never called press conferences. He announced the Emma Harrison Foundation, a complete restructuring of Harrison Pharmaceuticals' patient assistance program. Life-saving medications provided at cost or completely free to families in need. No applications, no waiting periods, no degrading interviews or means testing, no bureaucratic nightmares designed to discourage people from asking for help. Just help, extended with dignity to people who needed it. And sitting in the front row, wearing a simple blue dress she'd bought with money from her first paycheck as the foundation's family liaison director, was Sarah Matthews. No longer homeless, no longer invisible, no longer dismissed as worthless by a system designed to keep her down. Just a mother who'd survived hell and found her footing on the other side, now helping other mothers do the same. Beside her sat Lily, her hair in neat braids, her new backpack decorated with butterfly patches, looking healthy and happy and like a child who finally felt safe. And next to them, surprising everyone in the room who knew the story, sat a small boy with a bandana covering his bald head. Daniel, 6 years old, already responding to treatment, his color returning, his smile genuine. His mother Maria sat beside him, holding his hand tightly, tears streaming down her face as she listened to Michael describe the program that had saved her son's life. Michael caught Sarah's eye during the speech, and she smiled at him, the kind of smile that communicated everything words couldn't express. Gratitude, pride, friendship, hope. After the press conference ended, reporters swarmed Michael with questions about costs and logistics and implementation timelines. But Michael only cared about 4 specific people. He found Sarah, Lily, Daniel, and Maria outside near the fountain in front of the building, away from the chaos of cameras and questions. "You did it," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face again. "You're really changing everything. You're going to help so many families who are suffering the way we suffered." "We're doing it together," Michael corrected gently. "I needed you to show me how, to remind me why it matters." Daniel tugged on Michael's sleeve with his small hand. "Mr. Michael, my mama says you're the reason I'm getting better, that you're saving my life." Michael knelt down to Daniel's level, his throat suddenly tight. "Actually, buddy, it's this lady right here who saved you," he said, gesturing towards Sarah. "She's the one who made sure you got your medicine. I just helped a little bit with the details." Daniel turned to Sarah and without any hesitation wrapped his small arms around her waist in a fierce hug. "Thank you for not walking past me," he whispered into her side, his voice muffled. "Thank you for seeing me when everyone else was looking away." Sarah broke down completely, holding this child she'd saved, this child who was alive because she'd chosen compassion over survival instinct. Lily joined the hug without being asked, and then Maria wrapped her arms around all of them, and suddenly Michael found himself pulled into a group embrace with 4 people who'd been complete strangers just weeks ago. 4 people who'd been failed by every system designed to help them. 4 people who'd survived because one woman had chosen love when she had every reason to choose fear. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with, "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. 6 months passed like water flowing downhill, each day bringing small victories and gradual healing. Michael stood in the children's wing of Northwestern Medical Center, a wing that now bore his daughter's name in bronze letters, the Emma Harrison Pediatric Oncology Center, fully funded by the foundation. Fully staffed with doctors who'd committed to the mission of care over profit, built with the promise that no child would ever be turned away because their parents couldn't afford treatment. Sarah walked beside him now, tablet in hand, reviewing applications from families who needed help. She'd transformed in 6 months, not physically so much, though she looked healthier and less exhausted, but in confidence, in purpose, in the way she carried herself like someone who finally believed she had value beyond survival. "We've received 847 requests this month," she said, scrolling through the data. "The word is spreading faster than we anticipated. Every social worker in the city seems to know about us now." "Good," Michael said simply. "That means people are finally getting help instead of suffering in silence. That means we're actually reaching the families who need us most." They stopped in front of a large photograph hanging in the lobby, impossible to miss. Emma, at 8 years old, smiling that smile that had lit up every room she entered, alive and vibrant and full of hope. Underneath the photograph, a bronze plaque bore an inscription Michael had written himself. "In memory of Emma Harrison, who taught us that love is the most powerful medicine. May every child who enters here receive the care she deserved." Sarah touched the plaque gently with her fingertips. "She'd be proud of you," she said softly, her voice reverent in the quiet lobby. "Proud of the lives you're saving in her name." "She'd be proud of us," Michael corrected, watching children play in the newly renovated waiting room, visible through the glass wall. Colorful murals on the walls. Toys scattered across soft carpet, natural light streaming through windows designed to let in hope. "You're the one who made this possible by showing me what actually matters." Sarah shook her head, smiling slightly. "You gave me a credit card, that's all. And you spent it on someone else's dying child instead of yourself," Michael said, turning to face her directly. "That's not normal, Sarah. That's extraordinary. That's the kind of goodness most people don't have, even when they have everything." They stood in comfortable silence, watching children who were sick but getting treatment, who were fighting but not fighting alone. "Do you ever think about that morning at the subway station?" Sarah asked after a while. "Every single day," Michael admitted without hesitation. "Sometimes multiple times a day when I'm making decisions." "What were you thinking when you handed me that card?" "Honestly," Michael considered the question carefully. "I was testing you. Testing my father's theory that desperate people are inherently selfish and dangerous. That poverty turns people into liars and thieves. I wanted you to prove him wrong, but part of me expected you to prove him right. And now?" Sarah asked, watching his face. "Now I realize the test was never really about you," Michael said slowly. "It was about me, about whether I was capable of seeing humanity in someone I'd been taught to dismiss my entire life, about whether I could choose trust over the fear my father had programmed into me since childhood." He looked at Sarah directly. "You didn't just prove my father wrong. You proved I could become someone different. Someone better than the man I'd been for 42 years. Sarah's eyes glistened with fresh tears. "You know what's funny? When I spent that money on Daniel, I was terrified. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely sign the receipt. I thought you'd call the police, press charges, maybe even take Lily away from me as punishment." "Why did you do it then?" Michael asked, genuinely curious. "If you were that afraid, why risk everything?" "Because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't," Sarah said simply, her voice steady despite the tears. "I'd rather go to jail knowing I saved a child's life than stay safe knowing I walked away when I had the power to help. That's the fundamental difference between you and me," Michael said quietly. "You've always known instinctively what matters most. I had to lose everything I'd loved to learn that lesson." "You didn't lose everything," Sarah corrected gently. "You found something new, something real, something that gives your life meaning beyond just accumulating wealth." She gestured around the hospital wing, at the children being treated, at the families who no longer had to choose between medicine and rent, between healthcare and food. "Your daughter is still saving lives," Sarah said. "Just through you now, through the foundation, through every child who gets treatment because you decided to change the system instead of just accepting it." 1 year after that morning at Union Station, Michael stood on a stage at the Global Healthcare Summit in Geneva, accepting an award for revolutionary changes in pharmaceutical accessibility and patient care. but he barely heard the applause echoing through the enormous conference hall, because in the audience, sitting in the front row where he could see them, were 23 families. 23 families who'd been homeless or on the verge of it. 23 families who'd been failed by every safety net. 23 families who'd been helped by the Emma Harrison Foundation when no one else would. And at the center of that group, holding Lily's hand and wiping tears from her eyes, sat Sarah Matthews, no longer the family liaison director, though she'd excelled at that role. Now she was the foundation's executive director, overseeing programs in 7 states and planning expansion to 12 more, because she'd proven over and over again, through daily decisions and consistent compassion, that she understood something the entire healthcare industry had forgotten. That behind every medical bill, every insurance denial, every bureaucratic delay, was a human being, a mother, a father, a child, someone who mattered, someone whose life had value beyond what they could afford to pay. Michael's acceptance speech was short because he'd never been comfortable with praise or recognition. 1 year ago, I was a man who'd forgotten how to be human, he said simply, his voice steady despite the emotion churning inside. I'd let grief and cynicism convince me that the world was beyond saving, that helping people was pointless because you can't save everyone. He looked directly at Sarah in the audience. Then I met a woman who was homeless, desperate, and had every reason to be selfish. And when I gave her access to unlimited wealth for 24 hours, she used it to save a stranger's dying child instead of securing her own survival. His voice broke slightly. She reminded me that compassion isn't a luxury for people who can afford it. It's a choice available to everyone, regardless of circumstances. And we all have the power to choose it, even when choosing it costs us something, even when it's easier to look away. The audience erupted in applause that seemed to shake the building, but Michael only cared about 4 people clapping in the front row. Sarah, Lily, Daniel, Maria. 4 people who'd been invisible to society. 4 people who'd proven that humanity's greatest strength isn't wealth or power or prestige. It's the ability to see suffering and choose to help, especially when you have nothing to gain from it. That night after the ceremony, Michael took everyone to dinner. Not at some 5-star restaurant with dress codes and wine lists, but at a small Italian place in Sarah's neighborhood, the kind of place with red checkered tablecloths and breadsticks in paper baskets and family photos on the walls. Lily and Daniel colored together at one end of the table while the adults talked, their heads bent close over their artwork, comparing crayon techniques and laughing. "I've been thinking about something," Sarah said, twirling pasta on her fork, "about that morning at the subway station. The morning that changed everything." "What about it?" Michael asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. "You said you were testing me," Sarah continued, "testing whether desperate people could be trusted with wealth, whether poverty made people inherently selfish or dangerous, like your father taught you." "I did say that," Michael admitted. "But here's what I actually think," Sarah said softly, setting down her fork. "I think you were really testing yourself. Testing whether you could still trust your own humanity after everything you'd lost, whether you still had the capacity to hope." "The credit card was never really about me," Sarah continued, her voice gentle but certain. "It was about you giving yourself permission to believe again, to trust that maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't as cruel and hopeless as you'd convinced yourself it was after Emma died." Michael felt tears prick his eyes because she'd seen right through him in a way no one else ever had. "You're too perceptive for your own good," he said, trying to smile through the emotion. "I've had a lot of time to think," Sarah said with a slight smile. "Subway stations are excellent for philosophy when you can't sleep and have nothing but time and cold tile." "And what did you conclude?" Michael asked. "After all that subway station philosophy?" Sarah looked at Lily, laughing with Daniel, both children healthy and safe and happy. "I concluded that trauma tries to teach us to close our hearts," she said slowly, "to protect ourselves by trusting no one and helping no one, to build walls so high that nothing can hurt us anymore. But the real courage isn't in building those walls," Sarah continued. "It's in keeping your heart open even after it's been completely shattered. It's choosing vulnerability even when every instinct screams at you to protect yourself." She looked back at Michael with those eyes that had seen too much hardship, but somehow retained compassion anyway. "You kept your heart open," Sarah said, "even after losing Emma, even after years of convincing yourself you couldn't trust anyone. When it mattered most, you chose vulnerability over safety. You chose trust over fear. Because you made it worth the risk, Michael said quietly. Because you showed me that goodness still exists. I just made one choice, Sarah said. You made thousands of choices over the past year. Every family we've helped. Every policy you've changed. Every time you've chosen compassion over profit. Those were all your choices. Michael raised his water glass in a small toast. To making it worth the risk then. To choosing courage over fear. Sarah clinked her glass against his. To second chances, she added. To Emma, Maria said softly, raising her glass as well. Her voice was thick with emotion. To Emma, they all echoed, even the children stopping their coloring to raise their juice boxes. And in that moment, in a small Italian restaurant with checkered tablecloths and breadsticks in paper baskets, Michael finally understood what his daughter had tried to teach him all along. That wealth without compassion is just numbers in an account. That power without purpose is hollow achievement. That the richest thing you can own isn't money or property or status. It's the ability to look someone in the eyes and say, I see you, you matter, and I won't let you fall. Sarah had given him that gift, had broken his heart wide open with her impossible choice to save a stranger's child, had shattered every cynical assumption he'd built up over 5 years of grief and bitterness. And he would spend the rest of his life grateful that one freezing February morning, he'd stopped walking through that subway station. That he'd looked poverty directly in the face despite every instinct telling him to keep moving, and found extraordinary humanity staring back at him. The test he'd designed to evaluate Sarah's character had actually been a test of his own capacity for trust and hope. And he'd passed, not because he was inherently good, but because she'd shown him what goodness could look like even in the darkest circumstances. 2 years after that life-changing morning, Michael received a letter delivered to his office by courier. The return address was a residential treatment facility in California. Inside was a single page written in careful handwriting he hadn't seen in 7 years. Dad, I heard about the foundation, about what you've been doing. Mom told me. She still follows your work, even though she won't admit it. She showed me articles. I wanted you to know that what you're doing matters, that Emma would be proud, that I'm proud, even though I've been too angry to say it before now. The letter continued in that same careful handwriting. I blamed you for Emma's death. I blamed you for the divorce. I blamed you for everything that went wrong in our family. But I'm learning in therapy that blame is easier than grief, that sometimes we punish the people closest to us because they're the only ones who'll stay even when we're cruel. I'm not ready to see you yet, maybe not for a while, but I wanted you to know that I'm watching, that I see you trying to make things right, that I understand now that you were suffering too, not just me and Mom. Emma's death broke all of us. We just broke in different ways. The letter was signed simply, Your son, Christopher. Michael sat at his desk and cried harder than he'd cried in years. Not from sadness, though there was sadness in it, but from hope. From the possibility that maybe, eventually, he could rebuild what had been shattered. That forgiveness was possible even when it seemed impossibly distant. He called Sarah immediately. She came to his office within an hour, took one look at his face, and simply hugged him without asking questions. After he finally explained and showed her the letter, she smiled through her own tears. This is what happens when you choose love, she said simply. It ripples outward in ways you can't predict or control. You change my life and Lily's. We helped change Daniel's and Maria's. Now that change is reaching your son. That's how healing works, slowly, in circles, but it works. 3 years after the morning at Union Station, the Emma Harrison Foundation had helped over 3,000 families access life-saving medications and treatment. Daniel was completely cancer-free, thriving in 3rd grade, still wanting to be a paleontologist. Sarah had been featured in Time magazine as one of the most influential people reshaping healthcare advocacy, and Michael had dinner with his son, Christopher, for the first time in 7 years. It was awkward, stilted, full of long silences and careful words. But it was a beginning, a small crack in the wall that had divided them. After Christopher left the restaurant, Michael sat alone with his coffee and thought about the February morning, about a credit card extended to a stranger, about a woman who'd chosen to save a dying child instead of securing her own survival. about the test that had actually been about testing himself. His phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah. "How did it go with Christopher?" Michael typed back slowly. "It was hard, but good. A start." Her response came quickly. "That's all any of us can ask for. Small steps toward healing." He smiled and typed one more message. "Thank you for everything. For showing me what matters. For changing my life." Sarah's response made him laugh, despite the emotional weight of the evening. "You gave me a credit card. I just spent it honestly. That's all any of us can do. Spend our resources honestly and help when we can." Michael finished his coffee and walked home through the Chicago streets he had driven past for years without really seeing. He noticed things now that he'd been blind to before. A woman sleeping in a doorway with a backpack as a pillow. A man asking for change with a handmade sign about being a veteran. A young couple with a baby, clearly struggling, sitting outside a closed pharmacy. He couldn't help everyone. The problems were too big, too systemic, too deeply rooted in inequality and broken systems. But he could help some people, and those people could help others. And slowly, one person at a time, one choice at a time, maybe the world could become slightly less cruel. Michael pulled out his phone and opened the Foundation's emergency assistance line. Then he approached the woman sleeping in the doorway, knelt down despite his expensive suit, and gently woke her. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to disturb you. My name is Michael. I work with an organization that helps people in situations like yours. Would you be willing to talk with me for a few minutes about getting you somewhere warm tonight?" The woman looked at him with suspicion and exhaustion, clearly expecting some kind of catch or cruelty hidden behind kindness. But Michael just smiled gently and waited, giving her time to decide, respecting her autonomy even in her desperation. Finally, she nodded, and Michael made a call that would change another life, start another ripple, continue the work that Sarah had begun that February morning when she'd made an impossible choice. Because that's what love does. It ripples outward, it multiplies, it transforms not just the people who receive it, but the people who give it. And sometimes, if you're extraordinarily lucky, it brings you back to life after you thought you died inside. Sarah had taught him that. Had shown him through action rather than words that compassion isn't weakness, that trust isn't foolishness, that helping others doesn't diminish you but enlarges your humanity until you can barely recognize the smaller, meaner person you used to be. And every day Michael worked to honor that lesson, to live up to the example she'd set when she'd spent $156,000 saving a stranger's child, to be worthy of the second chance she'd given him, to become someone his daughter would have been proud of. The black card test hadn't been about testing Sarah's character at all. It had been about whether Michael could find his own humanity again, after years of burying it beneath grief and cynicism. And she'd helped him find it. Not by being perfect, but by being honest. Not by being extraordinary, though she was that too. But by simply choosing love when fear would have been easier. That was the real test, the only test that ever really mattered. Thank you so much for watching until the end. This story reminds us that compassion isn't about how much we have, but about what we choose to do with whatever we have. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more true stories that restore faith in humanity. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that goodness still exists in the world. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done with that black card? Would you have made the same choice Sarah made? We'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. And remember that every single day, you have opportunities to change someone's life, even in small ways. See you in the next story.